Hi, I'm Tona. We're here today. We're going to talk about my 1940 Rolson Packard. This has been in my family for many, many years. It was transferred to me from my father. My father acquired the car in the 50s and has kept it in the family since. The car has a history going back. Prior to that, my father acquired the car from a gentleman that he knew very well and took care of the car. The car came originally from the East Coast. My father was from the West Coast, from California. And so when my father acquired the car, it was actually in California. And then we moved to Florida quite a few years later, and hence I now have the car here in Florida. It is a 1940 a Rolson Packard. It was similar to a Darren Packard, only the Darrens were made on the West Coast and the Rolsons were made on the East Coast. The stories that I'm told is that there were actually 3 of them that were originally built. Not 1, not 2, there was 3 originally built. That's what I've been told. And that when Rolson completed those 3, one of them was destroyed in an accident. And there's a record of that, I'm told. I've never seen it, but I'm told that there's a clear record that it was destroyed and eliminated from the pool. And that the other 2 exist. From there, I've been told that, hey, one of them it's shown, it's known about, it's listed on the Packard registry, and it goes to the shows. This one was not known. It was assumed to have been destroyed because it just disappeared for so many years. Carl Bellinger Sr. was the CEO of I believe it's called the Anaconda copper mines in South America at the time. So he was a wealthy industrialist, and his son, Carl Bellinger Jr., that's who we're going to be talking about. His son was an up-and-coming young man, bright future. He was dating a girl at the time in Long Island, New York, who was probably much like him, young, fast, wild, and Carl's parents were very displeased with the relationship. And so his father and mother told him, hey, we'll make a deal with you. That custom Packard that you see in the window downtown, we'll buy you that car provided you break up with this woman. They wanted to make sure that he stayed on the right path in life and that he made a success of himself. His father, again, was a large industrialist, very successful. And so he agreed to the deal. Hey, they bought him this car. And then Carl Bellinger and his girlfriend went off and got married. And you knew that was coming. That marriage lasted, by the way, for I think it was 60-some years, I believe, before he passed away. He had a wonderful marriage, and the whole family thing worked out quite well. Carl went on to join the military. He became a test pilot. And I think he had quite a number of accolades, although I don't know them all. I know that he was either the first or one of the first to break the sound barrier. He flew a lot of the early planes that we developed in this country, and I think he even survived some crashes, as I understand. This car was one of his toys. It was one of the things that he loved. And my father, as a young man, as a teenager, got a job working for a company named Fairchild Hiller, and later became Republic Aviation. And they did contracting to the military. And my dad took employment there, and he became a crew chief. He was a mechanic on the planes. So he got assigned to Carl Bellinger's plane, and he became Carl's crew chief on the planes that he was test piloting. Subsequently, because he was the great mechanic on the man's plane, Carl and my dad struck out a good relationship, and Carl said, hey, do some stuff on my car, take care of my car. And so he did some minor things to the car. And as I understand, one day Carl was griping to his buddies, so to speak, about the Packard, that he'd had several people work on the paint work on it, and that nobody could get it right. That each time he took it in and they did paint work on it, eventually the paint started peeling back off. And my father was in the vicinity at the time. He overheard the conversation, and he piped up, hey, I could do that. I could paint that car. And Of course, he didn't have any history of painting cars, but he grew up with hot rods and he built them. And Carl said, "You think you could?" And he said, "I know I could." He said, "Well then, here," and he tossed him the keys. "See what you can do with it." So my father repainted the whole car, painted it black, did a fabulous job, and it stayed in that condition for, I don't know, 50 years after that. The paint job lasted really well. Subsequently, Carl said, "Look, you just take care of the car." So my dad started taking care of the car full time. Carl was all over the place. He was in the military. He was doing some exciting things that were emerging at the time. So he was in different places. And when he came back to the West Coast, he had use of the car. But when he was gone, he just left it in the possession of my dad. Interesting piece here. I said, "Dad, that must have been great. You were just a young man. You had this car to tool around town in." My father said, "I didn't even want to be seen in that car. I had a little hot rod I wanted to be seen in," okay?
Oh my God. So he didn't want to be seen in the Packard. He wanted a little roadster or something.
My dad had a 27 bucket roadster, man. That's what he wanted to be seen in.
That's so funny.
So he said, predominantly, I just gave the keys to my parents and I told them, "If you want to go into town, you drive the car." So as the years rolled by and my dad had physical possession of the car, things changed militarily and contracts changed. And some of the contract work that was on the West Coast moved back to the East Coast, back to New York. Consequently, the test pilots and the employees all went with it. And at the time, Carl came to my dad and said, "Hey, no one has ever taken care of that car like you. No one's ever loved that car like you. Hey, I'm not taking it with me. I'm leaving it with you. I'm giving it to you." And the car was given to my father.
Wow.
And so that's how it came to be in our family. And when I was a little boy, I can't even remember how little, because I just always remember it being this way. But we were probably, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old. I have 2 brothers, and my father had acquired a number of pretty cool cars. And so he gave each of us one of those cars. And my older brother got the hot rod, and I got the Packard, and my younger brother got another collectible car. When the original custom car went to what I'm going to call the hot rodder, because the original custom car was about appearance more so than anything, not performance. But then when it went to Metnick, as I understand, it was all about performance, and the appearance was secondary. They did alter the appearance. As you can see, we ended up with a different a hood rake, and the grill line, the front end is completely different, the windshield. So the general character of the car went from being what I would characterize as more upright to being more low slung with the Offenhauser type front end. Quite a few modifications to the engine. Yeah, I wish I could tell you I've driven it. I've never driven it, although I've talked to a couple of who are passed away now, but a couple of men that have driven the car, and they tell me it's quite the performer. I've been told that it's quite a thrill to drive.
There was a photo that I saw that there is a gentleman, it looks like it's at the Dry Lakes, with a German Shepherd, and he's got a bomber jacket. Is that your father, or is that?
That's my father's little brother. That's my Uncle Herb.
Did they tell you anything about that, specifically that picture? Was that a day that your dad and his brother or your uncle went out driving in the car?
He didn't, and when I asked him about that picture, I got more of a story about the dog than I did anything else. They really miss that dog, okay? But no, and I wish I had some story I could embellish about that picture, but I don't know. Right. And they didn't really remember. Yeah, the car got stored away in, well, I wouldn't characterize it as stored away initially. The car was parked, let's say, at my grandfather and my grandmother's ranch in California. So that was in the Leona Valley, up in Antelope Valley, California, which is just outside of Los Angeles. It's over the hills. And my family had a ranch there, of a large ranch, 350 acres. And my grandfather was into a lot of the same things. So he had what was essentially a bit of a salvage yard up there with a lot of collectible cars, a lot of things that he just acquired over the years. But that's where they lived. And that's where this car was parked, and that's where it came and went from. As time went on and my grandfather passed away, my dad, his brothers and sisters moved my grandmother off that ranch, and they moved her into town, into the town of Lancaster, California. And when they did that, they started taking things that were of value from the ranch and slowly moving them back into town. This car was one of them, and that would have been, I'm going to say probably the early 70s, late 60s or early 70s. So that's when the car came from literally being that place where it was used on the ranch to moving into a garage like a hidden find. And it did. They brought it into town. It moved into a small, your typical 50s style home there. Just a small, maybe 1,000 square foot house with a one-car garage. And this car was put in the garage and completely buried with other stuff that was stored with it, right? So you couldn't even see it. When you opened the door, you couldn't see the car, maybe a headlight or something. And we saw it all the years. We'd go out to visit family or see my grandmother that lived there, and we'd go look in the garage, and I knew it was in there, and I knew it was mine. And the years rolled on, and they rolled on. When I became an adult and I had my own shop, I had the car transported from California back to Florida. And some things had transpired. My grandmother at the time had passed away, so the house was being cleared out, and it was a little bit early for me. I was still fairly young, but you do what you have to do. It was time to move the car. So I moved the car from California to Florida and put it into my shop. That was probably around, not exactly, but probably around 1980 to 1983, maybe somewhere in there.
Oh, okay.
That it got moved down here.
Okay. So luckily it's been moved and it's been kept indoors, so the car, while it has aged, it isn't totally, rotted away to nothing.
It's not. It's actually in pretty sound condition, although that's laughable for a person that doesn't restore cars. For those of us that do or have, it's actually in pretty sound condition. The components are here. The car is largely complete. Despite the visual appearance, it runs quite well. In fact, it's so sweet when you start it. It's almost indescribable. And that's the God's honest truth. The first time, in fact, it had sat for many, many years, and the first time we turned it over, it fired up so quickly that it took us all back. And quite frankly, I've never heard a car that sounded better.
And it's got the straight eight.
Straight eight.
Yeah, with some old speed equipment type stuff. Like
Uh-huh.
dual carburetors I see, and aluminum intake that was polished, aluminum head polished. So you could see there's remnants of old chrome. You could tell somebody really, they put some money and time into this. Everything was probably chrome, all that flaky stuff, so.
My uncle told me that he could take, and I don't know what kind of speeds we're talking about, but I'd been in the car with him a number of times, so I'm guessing pretty high speed. But he said he would take this thing out on the highway, and he said at high speed that it was so smooth and so stable that it just hunkered down and just got smooth, man. You couldn't feel any bumps in the road or anything. He said it was ridiculous.
So
one of the things they did on this, and we don't get to see it now because those pieces are apart, but the dash was all customized. The owner was a test pilot, so he had all the gauges replaced with aircraft instruments. And he did a number of things to the vehicle like that we haven't even found it all. We haven't gotten deep into the engine and all, but he was a guy that wasn't afraid to make it totally custom, no matter how many times it's been customized. He made it for him.
Did they mention? I noticed it has Cadillac wheels. Is there any backstory on?
I've gotten a lot of stories on the wheels, and they're all pretty consistent.
Oh, Okay.
I'm like, what's up with the Cadillac wheels? How did those end up? And all of the old guys told me the same story. What, are you kidding? Just look at them.
Well, I'm glad that this car, all this time, didn't get, you know, something didn't happen to it because it had to be moved, and
Yeah.
your family was able to kind of make sure it was taken care of and at least stored away, and, you know, it still exists. 'Cause that's,
Man, and we're, you know, as you can see, we came about that close to being that bad story. And I hope that never occurs at this point, but we started a restoration. But hey, where we're at now, and it's not going to continue to get neglected.
yeah, I think that's, again, I'd rather see a car, it's in a dry storage,
Man.
even if it doesn't get touched, you know, it's here, it exists, and it can be finished or you know, you continue restoration, but it's not, like you said, back many years ago, it was just an old car, so it could have easily been one of those cars that got pushed away, got sold for, you know, whatever. So
Easily.
So I think that's important, and because it is a one of one.
I think it's got a pretty colorful history that we're still trying to ascertain those things, and hopefully through the efforts that are taking place today, through your efforts and the world of the internet, you know, we're going to get this information is now going out to people that didn't know that this car existed until now. And so it's my hope that we can get feedback and piece together the rest of the story, because what I know is valuable, but it's such a small sliver of the story of this car.